If this video appeared in your feed, it wasn't random. Carl Jung called moments like these synchronicities, meaningful coincidences that signal something profound happening beneath the surface of your awareness. You're here because you've passed through something that most people never survive intact. Jung discovered that life presents what he termed the final test. A confrontation with the unconscious so intense that it either destroys you or transforms you into something fundamentally different. Here's what makes this discovery so powerful. Most people experiencing this test believe they're having a breakdown. They think something has gone terribly wrong with their psychology. But Jung realized they're actually experiencing a breakthrough. The exact moment when consciousness evolves beyond its previous limitations. And if you're still watching, still searching, still trying to understand what happened to you, you've already passed. The question now is whether you understand the secret this passage has unlocked. Because once you grasp what Jung discovered about this transformation, everything that felt like suffering suddenly reveals itself as initiation. The final test doesn't announce itself with fanfare or warning. It arrives disguised as crisis, catastrophe, or collapse. You might experience it as sudden isolation from people you thought were permanent in your life. Everything that used to matter, the career ambitions, the social validation, the carefully constructed identity, suddenly feels hollow and meaningless. You're not depressed in the clinical sense. You're experiencing what Jung called the withdrawal of psychic energy from external objects. Your unconscious is pulling you inward because something fundamental needs to change. The symptoms are unmistakable once you know what to look for. You lose interest in maintaining the social masks that once felt essential. Small talk becomes unbearable. Shallow relationships feel suffocating. You can't force enthusiasm for things that used to excite you. Friends and family notice you've changed and they're worried. They think you're going through something negative. They want you to return to normal. But here's what they don't understand. You can't go back because you've outgrown the psychological container that used to hold you. Your psyche is demanding more space, more truth, more authenticity than your old life could accommodate. This isn't regression. It's growth that looks like disintegration to people still trapped in unconscious living. The isolation you feel during this period serves a specific purpose that Jung documented across hundreds of cases. When you're alone, stripped of social validation and external distraction, you're forced to encounter your actual self rather than the performed version you present to the world. Most people spend their entire lives avoiding this encounter. They fill every moment with noise, activity, and other people's opinions. So they never have to face the questions that emerge in silence. Who am I beneath all these roles? What do I actually want versus what I've been conditioned to pursue? Which parts of my personality are authentic? And which are survival strategies I developed to avoid rejection? These questions are terrifying because they don't have easy answers. They require you to sit with uncertainty and ambiguity. But this tolerance for uncertainty is exactly what you're developing during the final test. You're learning to exist without the psychological crutches that most people depend on their entire lives. Jung himself went through this exact process, and his experience became the foundation for understanding the final test. In 1913, at age 37, Carl Jung was at the peak of his professional success. He was Sigmund Freud's chosen successor, the heir apparent to psychoanalysis with a thriving practice and international recognition. Then something inside him snapped. He began experiencing visions and hearing voices. His colleagues thought he was having a psychotic break. Jung thought he might be going insane. He lost his friendship with Freud. His professional standing became uncertain. And he entered what he later called his confrontation with the unconscious. For 6 years, Jung descended into psychological territories that terrified him. He documented this journey in what became the Red Book, a massive tome filled with visions, dialogues with inner figures, and illustrations of psychological experiences that seemed to come from beyond his conscious mind. During this period, Jung appeared to the outside world like a man having a complete breakdown. He withdrew from public life, stopped publishing academic work, and devoted himself entirely to exploring these inner experiences. His wife, Emma, worried about his sanity. His colleagues wondered if he would ever return to normal professional life. Some openly speculated that Jung had lost his mind completely and would never practice psychology again. But Jung was doing.
You've always condemned.
The cruelty you insist you're incapable of. The sexuality you've judged as wrong.
The ambition you veikled arrogance.
The laziness you've hidden behind productivity. The neediness you've masked with independence. Every quality you've disowned becomes visible during this stage. What makes the shadow encounter so terrifying is that you can no longer deny these aspects exist within you. You see clearly that you're capable of the very behaviors you've judged most harshly in others. You recognize that your greatest criticisms of other people were always descriptions of your own disowned qualities. This realization feels like moral collapse. If you contain all these dark qualities, what does that say about your essential goodness? If you're capable of manipulation, cruelty, and selfishness, how are you different from the people you've judged? But Jung discovered something profound that transforms the entire shadow encounter. Integrating the shadow doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you a complete person.
The shadow isn't evil.
It's simply unconscious. These qualities you've repressed aren't inherently destructive. They become destructive only when they're denied and acted out unconsciously. When you bring shadow contents into consciousness and accept them as part of who you are, these qualities lose their destructive power and become available as resources. The rage becomes healthy boundary setting and the ability to protect yourself. The selfishness becomes necessary self-care and the wisdom to prioritize your own needs. The cruelty becomes discernment about who deserves your kindness and who is exploiting it. The sexuality becomes creative life force energy. The ambition becomes drive toward meaningful achievement. You don't act out these qualities unconsciously anymore because you've made them conscious. You can choose when and how to express them rather than having them erupt in destructive ways when you're stressed or triggered. The shadow integration process requires brutal honesty about your own capacity for darkness. You have to admit that yes, you are capable of lying when it serves you. Yes, you are capable of hurting people when they threaten you. Yes, you are capable of selfishness and manipulation and cruelty.
This admission feels like losing your innocence or your moral high ground.
But it's actually the beginning of real ethics. When you acknowledge your capacity for darkness, you can make conscious choices about how to engage these energies. You become responsible for your shadow rather than unconsciously acting it out while maintaining plausible deniability. The third stage represents the most visible death of all and the one that most disturbs the people around you. Your persona, the social mask you've worn your entire life, falls away completely.
The persona is the acceptable face you show the world.
The professional identity, the family role, the personality you constructed to gain approval and avoid rejection. You've probably spent decades perfecting this mask, making it so convincing that even you believed it was your real self. You learned exactly what to say to make people like you. You developed personas for different contexts. One personality at work, another with family, another with friends. You became skilled at reading social situations and adjusting your presentation to fit expectations. During the final test, maintaining the persona becomes impossible.
You can't pretend enthusiasm for social performances anymore. You can't force
yourself to care about impressing people. The things you used to do automatically to fit in now feel like unbearable acting. You're at a party and instead of working the room, you're watching yourself work the room and feeling disgusted by the performance. You're in a meeting and instead of managing your professional image, you're acutely aware of how fake everyone sounds, including yourself. People who knew your persona become confused and sometimes threatened by your transformation. They keep waiting for you to go back to being who you were. They offer advice about getting back to normal. They suggest therapy or medication to restore your previous personality. Family members might accuse you of becoming selfish or changing in negative ways. Friends might drift away because you're no longer performing the role they expected. Colleagues might find you difficult or unprofessional because you're no longer playing corporate social games. But the persona isn't coming back because it was never real. It was a construction, a survival strategy you developed to navigate a world that punished authenticity. Now that you've glimpsed what lies beneath the mask, you can't unknow it. You're left standing naked in your essential self without the protective covering that made you socially acceptable. This stage feels like social death because in many ways it is. The version of you that people knew is gone. They're going to have to meet and accept the real you or exit your life. After the persona falls and you're stripped down to raw authenticity, most people expect the story to end in disaster. Without your social masks, without your projections, without your shadows safely hidden, you should be completely vulnerable and psychologically destroyed. Society has spent your entire life conditioning you to believe that authenticity equals destruction. But this is where Jung discovered the secret that changes everything. The moment of passing the final test isn't about fighting the darkness or reconstructing your defenses or transcending your humanity. It's about accepting and integrating everything you've discovered.
This is the secret. Integration, not improvement, not transcendence, not spiritual bypassing where you pretend to be above a human darkness.
Integration.
You don't get rid of your shadow.
You accept it as part of your complete self.
You don't rebuild your persona.
You learn to engage authentically while reading social situations wisely. You don't project power back onto external authorities. You claim your own authority while remaining humble about the limits of your knowledge. Integration means holding the tension between opposites within yourself without needing to resolve them into false simplicity. You're capable of both kindness and cruelty, so you choose kindness consciously while acknowledging your capacity for cruelty. You're capable of both selfishness and generosity, so you're generous strategically while maintaining necessary selfishness. You contain both darkness and light.
And you stop pretending the darkness doesn't exist.
This is what Jung meant by the union of opposites. You're not trying to be only good or only light. You're embracing your full human complexity. This integration creates a kind of psychological stability that most people never experience. When you're no longer at war with parts of yourself, when you've accepted your full nature, you stop being thrown off balance by life's challenges. You've already faced the worst thing, your own darkness. External circumstances can't devastate you the way they devastate people who haven't done this work. What happens after you pass the test? Jung documented specific abilities that emerge in people who successfully integrate their unconscious contents. These aren't superpowers in the supernatural sense. They're natural capacities